Welcome to Operations and Supply Chain University. I'm Jerry Wright. This is lesson number 15, Kanban. So Kanban in Japanese means sign, signboard, or billboard. But for our purposes, Kanban essentially means visual signal. A visual signal is used to replenish materials consumed in a lean production process. Here's an example of a Kanban card. Here's a Kanban bin, so the card's actually attached to the bin. Now let me show you how Kanban works in a very simplistic method. So here is two boxes of part X. They're on a flow rack. And again, first in, first out flow, we want to consume the parts in front and then get to the parts in back. Now let's say an operator comes up and says, hey, I need a box of part X. Here's our operator. Go get a box of part X, operator. Okay, great. They take a box of part X. Okay, now I have an empty space. It basically says I need to replenish part X from my supplier. Let's say we order a box of paper from an Office Depot or a Staples or something like that. Now, because I'm doing first in, first out, I'm going to go ahead and move that box forward while I send my order off to the supplier. So I'm going to move my box forward. Now, my supplier, let's say it's Acme Vendor Delivery, brings a box in, we put a label on it, and then Kanban is done. That just repeats endlessly as long as part X is being consumed. If for some reason part X is not being consumed, you have two boxes sitting there, that is your entire inventory commitment. You have to set up something very much like this for every single part you have to keep the material replenished. Now, often people resort to what's called material requirements planning, or MRP. The problem is MRP doesn't work well. Here's why it does not work well. MRP, or material requirements planning, creates purchase order quantities from these different areas. They look at inventory levels, data entry transactions, forecasts or guesses, which, by the way, 50 to 60% is common, 70% is decent, and I see that sometimes. Best I've ever seen is 85%, and that's rare. So think of 70% accuracy as all I have on my forecasting. Then actual quantities from suppliers, sometimes they give you too much, but usually you're a little short, particularly in large batches. And then bill of materials are often inaccurate. So with all these inaccuracies, to know your true accuracy in total, you have to actually multiply them all together. When you take 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.7, you end up with 65% accuracy. So if you think about it, we really just have materials random predictions. Now, that's not good. That's not going to work well. It requires a lot of effort to set up MRP, and then it doesn't work effectively. Now, it does exactly what it's supposed to do, but the errors and the challenges are in these different categories, and they're hard to fix because most companies have thousands of part numbers, not just a few hundred. So it gets challenging. Now, why is Kanban better than MRP? Kanban is all based on usage. If I use it, I replenish it. If I don't use it, I don't replenish it. Now, keep in mind with Kanban, we're going to have variation in our supply chain. We can use historical data to estimate what our Kanban level should be, but we have to understand there's going to be variation. It's going to change. Now, we can determine how many bins we want based on our service level. Most companies want to operate at a 95% or higher service level. Now, when you look at the number of bins you're going to use along with the safety factor, 98% service level is represented by 2 bins. That's pretty good. To go to 3 bins, if you wanted almost a 99.9% service level, that's a lot of extra inventory. So I don't recommend going to 3 bins. 2 bins works extremely well. 98% service level or higher is typical. Now, where do the bins come from? Again, this is a service level factor, so it's what's called a Z table. And if you notice that those different numbers there, 2 Kanban bins is really good. That's going to give us that high level. You can see 98% is 2.05. We're just going to truncate and say it's 2. And then we're also going to have a safety factor to understand there's variation in lead time and variation in daily consumption. So that's where the number of bins comes from. It's statistically estimated for a 98% service level approximately. Now here's some Kanban examples. Cards can be permanently attached to bins so that the bin or the container itself becomes a Kanban, or you can have cards slipped in, or you can have labels. There's any different way to do it. Now, sometimes these are called two-bin systems because while one bin is at the production source being consumed, the other one's being refilled or it's sitting in stock. So that's why they're often called two-bin systems. In this example, there's a return chute where the empty bins are put for the material handling people to come by and pick up and refill. And then there's typically rack labels so you know what's there, what's missing, what belongs where. Here's some other more common everyday Kanban examples. Think of them again as visual signals, right? Low battery, printer inks low, replacing the Butterfingers or the Oreos or whatever it is in the snack machine. They just fill up the empty slots. That's their Kanban. I like this milk example. This is when you need to tell me we need more milk, not here. That's obviously from a frustrated parent, right? And then, of course, the common one for all of us who have gasoline-based cars, the fuel gauge. When should you fill up based on the fuel gauge? If you're full, both Kanban bins, remember 2 Kanbans is normal, would be full. So that means when one Kanban bin, so from full to half, is emptied, it's time to replenish. So logically, you should be at a half of a tank is when you go to the gas station. But I know many people wait till they're at a quarter of a tank or even on empty before they refill. But keep in mind, if you have half a tank, you can go somewhere right away without going to the gas station. And if there's like a power outage or a hurricane or a wildfire or something that disrupts you, and for some reason the power's out, the gas pumps don't work at the service station. They need electricity to pump gas. So typically you want to make sure you always have a half a tank just for safety reasons. Now there's another thing that we call Kanban supermarkets. Technically, each Kanban itself is a little supermarket unto itself, but a supermarket means a collection of different parts that are basically feeding a buffer. So if you want to have good level operation, you don't want to have a lot of disruptions, it's good to have feeder systems that allow you to pull from stuff, which we call the supermarket, and then be able to complete your line items. So example down here, we have an end of line cell that's going to make transformers in this example. They need tanks to build the transformers, so you need to have a supermarket of tanks ready to pull from in various sizes so they can complete orders in the end of line cell. As they pull tanks from the supermarket, oh, we had 6, now we only have 4. Okay, we got to build 2 more tanks, and then they replenish them. And this just keeps going on and on and on. That supermarket of tanks is essentially just like going to the grocery store and getting your food. So it's really a variation of min-max, which Kanban is essentially a min-max. 1 Kanban is your min, 2 Kanbans is your max. That's an easy way to go, and that's essentially what a supermarket is. Now here's an example I want to share from this happened to be related to transformers. So there was a problem at this particular plant. They had daily stockouts on insulating paper for power transformers. There were typically 8 to 10 shortages on coil winding insulation paper every day. And the sad thing was this paper supplier was on site in the transformer factory. There was a lack of standard work, how to follow FIFO effectively, and a simple visual signal for replenishment on the on-site vendor. There really wasn't a good Kanban system, essentially, is what it was. After we set up the Kanban Pulse supermarket and trained all the users, the daily shortages went to 0. And they have gone more than 8 years with 0 shortages. And this is kind of what it looks like, insulating paper for transformers. 8 to 10 shortages a day, constant disruption, frustration, to 0. Everything there all the time, properly labeled, set up and running effectively. So what they thought was a supermarket really wasn't. It was just a place they put stuff randomly, and we turned it into a Kanban and fixed all the problems. Now, Toyota has 6 Kanban rules. 1, do not send defective products to the subsequent process or the downstream process. Kanbans represent only good parts ready to use. 2, the subsequent process comes and takes only what is needed. No hoarding. I don't take extra. I only take exactly what's needed because it causes problems if I hoard. 3, produce only the exact quantity. Don't make extra, just make the Kanban quantity and you're done. We don't want to cause overproduction because it hides and creates all the other wastes. 4, level the production. Try to minimize variation and look at how you can level the production and build a little bit of each type each day so that we minimize the overall work in process. 5, Kanban is really meant to be a means of fine-tuning. Kanban is meant to be more than just inventory control and scheduling. It tells us when something is out of place or not working properly. It points out the challenges so we can fix them. And then 6, stabilize and rationalize the process. There should be standard work associated to Kanbans and how often you change them and check them. That's really what Toyota expects in managing of the Kanban. All right, Kanban summary. MRP is flawed. It uses guessing. Guessing is not accurate. So we're going to go to Kanban. Kanban is accurate all the time. It basically replenishes only based on consumption or usage. Kanban is a visual signal. The rule is 2 Kanban bins or 2 cards. We'll use a safety factor of 1.5, and we'll talk more about that in the next lesson on Kanban calculation. If you find a lost bin or a card, give it to material handling. The stockroom or inventory control means something happened and they need to recover it and get it fixed. And then last, if your Kanban is empty, fill it up. Now, if you want to read more about Kanban, MRP, and how you can fix it, I wrote a book called The Insanity Trap. And it's very, very helpful in telling you where MRP doesn't work, how Kanban does work, and what you can do about it. It's very straightforward, and there's a lot of good lean lessons in this book. I hope you read it. It's available on Amazon. That's it for this lesson. Kanban calculation is in our next lesson. Thank you.